This is Jimmy coming to you from Gen Con 2019. I'm here with Drew. I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Hey everybody, I'm Drew Nolosco. I am the global brand manager in charge of the Transformers trading card game.
You just announced Wave 4. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah,
coming out
Cybertron Siege 2.
Yeah. Is the release schedule that you have planned sort of solid going forward every 3 months or so?
Every 3 months is a really comfortable time period for releasing new booster sets, and then we'll sprinkle in other products in between, right? Like smaller products that aren't the size or the commitment of a full booster set. But right now, every 3 months seems to be working pretty well.
Is the plan for like the tournament schedule to always have it in the December sort of area, or is that like the open sort of wrap up?
So this year we had our organized play schedule running Origins and Gen Con as open events, leading into the Invitational, the Energon Invitational in December at PAX Unplugged. And then we have in-store play qualifiers driving through people to that event as well, and that runs up to September 30th. As with everything we do with Transformers, we're going to look and see how that worked. So far, so good. So we're pretty happy with what's gone on before, but we need to get through the entire season before we can see did all of these pieces make sense. So far, the open events like the one we're running here at Gen Con have been working really well. And then we're going to look at the timing of the in-store play events once we get past September 30th, which is a long-winded way of saying, like with most things we do with Transformers, iterative improvement is the name of the game.
So Triptychon looks pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I'm very excited for another Titan type card. The first new mechanic that sort of got revealed was the Revenge.
Yep.
Are there any other sort of new mechanics that you can talk about or reveal at this time, or at least confirm that there are new mechanics besides this?
There are absolutely new mechanics and design spaces and play patterns built into Siege 2. Revenge happens to be a keyword mechanic that you see there in the Triptychon family of cards, but there's a lot of interesting stuff. A while ago, I've been saying that Siege 2 represents the desperate end of the days on Cybertron, and that each of the factions would take extreme measures in order to win the war. Triptychon is one of those first measures, right? Like he's not the world's most stable bot, and the fact that the Decepticons have to go to that extreme length suggests that there's something going on the Autobot side that is powerful enough that they need a Titan, even one as uncontrollable as Triptychon from the story point of view, in order to counter that. So yes, there's other really cool things, and we'll be rolling them out over time.
The other thing I'd like to ask specifically about Wave 4, is there a new pip color? No new pip.
There's no new pip color. So we've deployed the core new pips. When we're starting a new trading card game, we don't want to put everything out there because information overload is a real issue when you're starting up a new game. Like, too many choices, too many strategies at once is actually detrimental to people onboarding the game. So we rolled them out over the course of successive sets, and once we got to the black pip that grants Pierce in War for Cybertron Siege 1, we established the core family of pips. Are we going to do new pips in the future? Yeah, we'll sprinkle them in here and there, but it's not, the pattern isn't every set will have a new pip. And so Siege 2 doesn't have a new pip.
All right, so the core family that you had planned at the beginning was the 5.
That's correct.
The 5 colors.
Right. Attack, defense, critical hit for extra flips, card fetching in the green pip, and Pierce in the black pip are the core 5 pips.
Awesome. Can we move on to some questions from the fans? All right.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the questions. I love doing this. Please keep the questions coming.
So obviously the big one is Unicron. Do you have plans for Unicron?
So it's funny that you bring this up. There's no product in development right now for Unicron. However, I would love to bring Unicron into the game. I would love to bring Primus. I would love to bring Primus's kids, the 13, into the game. and one of the things that we're thinking about is how do we make Unicron feel like Unicron and also fit into the trading card game. Like one of the things that we do is we play with the size of our cards, right? And if a Titan card is about this big, how big does Unicron have to be that feels like he's Unicron while not requiring a minivan to move around for, so we're working on that from sort of the idea space. I wouldn't say it's an inevitability, but it's something we're very desirous of doing. It's not going to be a 2019 thing, might not even be a 2020 thing. But particularly with Hasbro's announcement of the 28-inch tall Unicron. It was funny, I was working the Transformers booth at San Diego Comic-Con, so I was standing next to him, and we were wearing these shirts that said, "Ask me about Unicron." So it was just nonstop questions about Unicron, and this question's inevitable, right? Like, because we follow the toy line for some of our sets.
I guess next question is, are there any plans in the works for a third faction beyond just Autobots and Decepticons? The Quintessence, for example.
I mean, there are other factions in the 35-year history of Transformers, right? And you mentioned the Quintessons. And from a very, very technical point of view, there are other forms of transforming life outside. Like the Quintessons really aren't transforming life, right? They convert in the fact that their faces move to represent a different emotion. But there are, like the Junkions, are one form of converting life inside the Transformers universe. Are we going to bring them in? Yeah, they're on the plate, right? Like, we're going to go that deep at some point. They're not in Siege, for example. I mean, from a really, like I've said this before, I love the Titans, right? And I love the concept that the Titans were really Cybertronian colony ships that went out. Like, that version of the Titans really excites me because, you get Caminus and, all of these other Titans and their groups of characters, their bots, who all, like Velocitron, like they all bring something really interesting to the table. And they're not technically Autobots or Decepticons, although some of them have been. Like Windblade is not originally from Cybertron, right? Yeah. In some versions of the continuity.
Next question would be, are there any plans for characters like Double Dealer or Punch Counter Punch where they have a split allegiance?
Oh.
And how might you implement that in gameplay terms?
These questions are challenging because let me give you the meta answer. And the meta answer is there's very few things inside of the Generations family of Transformers stories and toys that aren't on the table. But there's extremely few things that we couldn't implement. What is important to us is that we implement in a way that feels faithful to where they came from and feels like it's adding to and building up the options for players. So I could easily rattle off some awesome ways that we could do Punch Counter Punch, for example. Like, none of these are for sure, but like we could have two character cards that are, Punch and Counter Punch that are swapping in and out of play to replace one another. Like we could have, interesting fold card, like there. So we have the tools to do this. I'm not going to say exactly what we think would be the best way to do this, but know that we're building up this suite of physical ways to represent Transformers characters that allow us to do just about everybody. Six changers are tough.
Yeah, I was super excited about when the combiners came out. That was a really cool thing. I actually played Menasor in the tournament yesterday.
How'd that go?
I got 14th. So
okay.
I mean, the highest I got was 8th, and then I dropped down to 14.
I mean,
but
there were over 50 people in that. That was it the afternoon event or the morning event?
Yeah, I did the 4 o'clock event with Menasor.
There were over 50 people in that event, so you not only are in the top half, you're like well into the top thirds. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, it was super fun. Thank you. Me personally, I like playing those types of characters that, I don't know, don't get a lot of play in the sort of meta of the game.
And that's the strength of the Transformers TCG, is that we can bring in all of the characters in varieties of ways and have characters that have very, very niche abilities from a game point of view that really challenge and inspire players to say, how do I use this most effectively? And it's cool that you're that type of player, because you represent innovation, right? Like you're like, that's an interesting thing. It's not obvious how I'm going to succeed with that, but there's a way, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, for me, I'm going to talk about Menasor now. For me, I had no interest in Menasor to begin with, but my nephew loved playing with him. He was like all about him when it first came out.
Okay.
That was the one he wanted. And then we were playing one day, and I sort of really started to look at the cards, and I was like, wait a minute, I think there's something here. So it's just like they allow you to have these aha moments, which is really great. I think that's 95% of the fun of the Transformers game is finding those things and making the combinations.
Yep, I agree with you completely. And Menasor is really interesting because he's a Decepticon who's comprised of cars and trucks, right? So normally you don't get to play the car and truck family of cards in a Decepticon deck because there aren't that many car and truck. I mean, there's always going to be some, but that deck says, hey, how do I use those cards that are typically on the Autobot side and bring them into this deck?
The next question from the fans, are there plans for rules for multiplayer matches in the works? Because that's a huge thing I know for me. Not right now.
Not right now. Right now we're focusing on 1v1 play.
Yep.
But one of the potential ways that we could implement someone like Unicron is as a raid and have cooperative multiplayer where Unicron is facing down 4 players, say, and so there are many ways that we could implement multiplayer. I'm a huge fan of multiplayer. Like, I play Magic, but Commander is my main expression of Magic. So we're going to focus on continuing to build that 1v1, and then once we have the super critical mass of 1v1 enthusiasts and we see a critical mass of multiplayer enthusiasts who want that, then we'll talk about that multiplayer.
So you just talked about multiplayer and a possible raid. Any other game modes that you're thinking about or toying with at the moment?
No. We're really happy where we are. So, we've got constructed play. Turbo has been fantastic for us. Turbo is really, really a shockingly amazing tool both for us as a brand and for players as a way to have that quick experience. And it's the best way to open a box of boosters. So we're going to be focusing on constructed and then limited in the form of turbo and sealed.
Yep.
And then draft will be a sort of one step removed for the most high-level players who really want a very, very deep strategy experience in not just the gameplay, but the method of deck building.
So I heard from somebody that Grapple is your favorite Transformer.
Yeah, because Grapple's my favorite Transformers character, not just cart, but because it was connected with a very important personal life experience. Like, I learned how to save money so I could get a larger Transformers character as a kid, and Grapple was that character. And I still have my G1 Grapple.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, some of my G1 toys from when I was a kid, I would say met an untimely end through play, possibly in confrontation with G.I. Joe. And then some of them just were lost to the ravages of time and moving. But a few of them were so important to me that I've kept and hands-on no matter what, and Grapple's one of them.
Did you help make his card? Was that?
No, actually I didn't. No. I don't do a ton of game design. Okay. I worked on the core system design. There were a lot of people who worked on that. In terms of how we organize our team, I pretty much run things outside of game design. And then there's another leader, Charlie Catino, who runs the game design group for Transformers.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you tried to insert yourself to favorite character.
My background is in game design, and we all participate in playtests. That's part of the job.
Yep.
But no, core game design responsibilities fall under a bunch of other talented people.
I guess, is there anything else that you want to talk about or promote that we haven't touched on so far?
How do you think the open event's gone so far?
I mean, you had firsthand experience from
Sure.
events.
Yeah. I actually played in Origins as well. Didn't do too well there. And my brother actually qualified for the Energon Invitational.
Am I going to see you at PAX Tabletop?
Probably. Yeah, I'm probably going to come with him and try and do a store qualifier so that I can also compete.
Yeah, so maybe one thing that I would want to point out to all the fans is every store that received a in-store play kit is eligible to run a qualifier. And if your local store isn't and you want more opportunities, ask your stores in your area, because they're all of them that received that kit are eligible to run that qualifying event. And in some cases, you just have to ask the store owner to, like, hey, can you schedule this? And people will show up.
So this was Jimmy and Drew at Gen Con 2019, and we're signing off.